Alright, welcome back everybody to the annual progress update on Project Enchanter. For those of you who don't know I've told a few people, but it's not as many as I thought it was, I don't think. So, for those of you who don't know, I've learned a lot over the last few years about software engineering and systems building, and I knew that over the last few years, as in the entire lifetime of this project, because one of the first things I did when I first learned how to code was start this project, which was probably not a great idea. But, hindsight's 2020, and I knew that as I started learning more, I realized that eventually I was going to have to pretty much scrap everything and rebuild it all, just with all the stuff I had learned to make it more modular, more secure, more... I don't know what the word is. Just better. Better in general. And this last summer, between my 2 semesters, I was like, this is the time. And so I literally scrapped everything that I had and started completely over with a blank project. So a lot of the previous features and progress is gone, but the new stuff is far more modular and easily built upon and way more reliable than the old systems were, and they're built with real software engineering practices and in designs. So stuff like the building system and the NPCs, they're not here anymore, and what I've been working on mostly is the combat system, getting the combat system back up, and building things with actual software engineering practices. It might shock you to find is way slower than just hacking code out until it works, which is why it has taken so long to get just the combat system, which initially, even learning the entire engine and the language, took me less time than it has taken me to get it back up. But the new system is far more deep, and it's way more easily extensible. So that's the main focus of this demo. It's made with programmer art mostly, because I don't want the art or the level design to be the focus of this. What I'm mostly looking at is, or want you to look at, is the horizontal progression of the loot system and the combat, where instead of just getting the same models over and over again with higher damage numbers, which is what we refer to as vertical progression in video games. Instead, what you're chasing after in the loot system is new enchantments and weapon perks and weapon arts on your weapons, and stat scalars that boost the damage and the efficiency of weapons based on certain stats that your character has, as opposed to just higher stat numbers. Not to say that there's anything wrong with those. I love those kinds of games, but I do enjoy player expression and player freedom quite a bit more, and I feel like loot systems should really bolster that. So the enchantments will completely change the way you play the game. They can bolster different play styles, some more aggressive, some more passive, things like that. So I've selected 3 mostly polished enchantments and weapons to feature in this demo and kind of let you get a feel for the flow of combat in this game, because I want to make sure that the flow is there, it's right. I want to know early on if it's too slow or it's too fast, or the weapon enchantments just don't work and I need to rethink those, stuff like that. And we'll talk about weapon arts, perks, and enchantments later on. The perks for this aren't active because that wasn't my main focus, and those are tied to the loot system, which has also been deactivated for this because it's not entirely done. So the weapon perks have been statically decided. What I'm mostly focusing on is the enchantments and the weapon arts and the move sets of different weapons. So we'll talk more about that when we get into the actual demo. I'm sorry for the lack of editing. I wanted to get this out soon, and I also just don't like hearing my own voice, so if there's any editing, it will be very little. But with that said, let's move into the character creator, which I have put together for this demo. Well, it's for the game, but there's lots of stuff in here that's not implemented yet, and it's pretty obvious. But let's take a look at what is here. We have skin tone. It's a very Destiny-styled character creator. You can choose different hairstyles. You can be bald. Different beards. Hopefully there will be a lot more here, like tattoos and face paint and scars and stuff like that later on. I would really enjoy having the ability to change your character's gender, and I actually have all the animations and hairstyles for that already. The problem is that I'm not a 3D modeler, and all of the armor sets that I have are modeled for male characters because I buy all of the art that I use. So I don't know if that'll ever be implemented. I really hope that it will, but I don't want to make horrible female armor sets. So for now that's disabled, but hopefully it will come in the future. But moving on, we can change our hair color, and then we can name our character, and the name will appear in the save slot along with your character's current location and their level. So let's just name our character and move right into the combat demo, and I'll see you guys there. Alright, so this is the tutorial section of the game, because there is no tutorial per se built yet, because a lot of the controls are subject to change still, but it's mostly because tutorials take time to build, and time is not something I have the luxury of a large amount of right now. So especially with a demo that's mostly showcasing the flow of combat and the horizontal progression of the loot system. So I'm gonna do a tutorial section here. So I'm gonna preface this with, if you don't have an Xbox controller to play with the to play on your PC, you probably won't be able to play this to its fullest extent. You may be able to, but there's a lot of functionality that probably just won't work, because I haven't mapped everything out to a keyboard and mouse, because I'm more comfortable with a controller, and I feel like these more, I hate to say Souls-like because that's used everywhere, but these Souls-like games are, they just feel better on a controller. The same for stuff like The Witcher and the new Assassin's Creed games. They're just suited for a controller, because that's what the whole lock-on system and everything like that was built for people playing with the dual analog system. So onto the buttons and the inputs and stuff like that. We have the standard dual analog system. So look with the right joystick, move with the left joystick. Select brings up your equipment screen, and it's very Destiny-like, Destiny 2-like. Please don't sue me, I have like $5 to my name. Anyway, there is an actual inventory screen here, even though it says this is the inventory screen. It is not. If you press LB, that's the actual inventory screen. I just haven't changed those yet. They may change by the time the demo comes out. But anyway, a lot of the stuff here isn't fully implemented yet. Like you can see, the enchantment name on this weapon is the debug name. So, and this goes completely off screen. So a lot of this isn't implemented yet. Like there are no consumables. So this is the screen that you will be interacting with for this demo. It's the only screen you need to know about, and it works just like the Destiny menus, where you hover over the slot you would like to equip it to, this being the primary, this being the secondary, and you just press A on the item that you want to equip, and it will auto-equip it there. So let's move on to the in-game inputs. So for those of you who have forgotten or are new, the whole combat system works on a two-weapon system. You have two weapons readily accessible to you in any combat scenario. Left D-pad will draw your primary weapon, right D-pad will draw your secondary. If you've played The Witcher, the system should be very familiar to you, because I adored that system, but it was very thematic for its or it fit in very thematically, and I felt like it wasn't used to its full potential. So, um, free from the shackles of the Witcher's universe, I was able to make it to where you can equip any weapon in either slot, and it allows for some very varied combat encounters, because you can take one weapon that is very this playstyle and one weapon that is very the opposite playstyle, and you can switch between them on the fly. So let's talk about a few of the major button presses. So B is your jump when you are not in combat. A is a roll. If you are in combat, Y does nothing if you're out of combat, I don't think. I don't know, it's been a long time. So when you're in combat, LT will block. RT does nothing yet. LB and RB are reserved for consumables like throwing bombs and spells like fireballs, that kind of stuff. So in combat, B is your movement ability, which for this demo is exclusively the quick dodge, which is 4-directional, but it costs no stamina to use. It does not give you iframes though, like the roll does, which costs quite a bit of stamina, but covers a large distance and will make you invulnerable for a short duration. Y is your heavy attack, and the difference between heavy and light attacks vary from weapon to weapon, but for all the weapons in this demo, that's pretty much, the light attack is a lot faster, obviously, but it's also 1 hit per enemy. The heavy attack is 2 hits per enemy, and you can cancel in between the 2 hits. Each of these weapons has 3 animations per set, and that can vary from weapon to weapon, but all of these are kind of the same class, so they get the same number of animations. The Sword of the Wisps happens to be the slowest sword, but it also is the highest damage sword. This Knight Sword is the lowest damage, but it is much, much faster than the others. So X for light attack, Y for heavy attack. Each weapon also comes with a weapon art, which, if you've played Dark Souls 3, you know what that is, sort of, but I have kind of expanded upon that. So you hold Y to activate a weapon art, and each weapon's weapon art can vary drastically. For this demo, all of the weapon arts are simple block breaks, so we hold Y, and on these 2 weapons you'll get a large sweeping attack, and it will break blocks, but it does cost, if you see in the top left corner, a pretty huge amount of stamina, so you have to use it wisely. But you can take out a lot of enemies and break everyone's block in your way with it. The Rapier, which I do not have equipped. The Rapier's weapon art is different. It is a jab forward, but it does the same thing, essentially. It's a block break. It does quite a bit more damage, I think, than the sweeping attack, but I'm not sure. It's been a while. So this one is the exact same as the Sword of the Wisps. It has a shorter range outward because the melee collision for this weapon is quite a bit shorter, but it does the same thing. It will hit anybody it touches and will break anyone's block. Some other things to note are the right joystick. If you press down on it, that guy's not targetable. If you press down on it, you will lock on to the enemy. LT to block again. Blocking will slow down your stamina recovery and all that good stuff. So that should be it for the controls. If I left anything out, I'll put it in the description. So sorry for the poor editing again. I just don't like listening to my own voice, so if there's any editing, it will be very little. So we have a hold Y attack. What about a hold X attack, you might think? Well, if you hold X, the enchantment that your weapon has, all enchantments have a passive and an active. And so to activate their active, whatever it may be, a lot of them, they can either augment your playstyle or your damage or things like that. Some of them are more active, meaning they actually do different things and require stuff to be out on the field already. So that's what holding X does. And if there is no enchantment, like if the weapon dropped with no enchantment, holding X will be a forced critical attack. So, but it does consume a percentage of mana, because I realize that augmenting damage is actually objectively better, but I would rather people play more with the more air quotes gimmicky effects, because I think that they'll have a better time if they do. So a force critical will be a percentage of mana, so you will never be able to just stick with that, because it is objectively air quotes better, because it is just a flat stat buff. So I would rather people express themselves more through gameplay and the different enchantment styles and play styles that come with those. Alright, so now we're going to talk about the different types of enchantments included in this demo, which is mostly the main focus of this demo, as I said earlier. This is a real demonstration of the horizontal progression you can expect from the loot system and the leveling system. So, the first enchantment we have on the Sword of the Wisps, which is what I have on my primary, this sword right here, is called Temporal Rift, and basically what it's going to do is every hit that you have on an enemy, there's a 50% chance to drop a Temporal Rift. And these Temporal Rifts won't do anything by default, which if you don't like that, I'm open to feedback on this one. This one is one of the more complex enchantments in this demo, so it's also most subject to change, but I do like it a lot. So what's going to happen is, if you hold X to activate this enchantment, your character will be teleported back to the original location, or I guess it's more of a, it's like what, well, I can't say that, I'll get sued again. You will sweep back to your original location, and while you're sweeping through, if you pass through an enemy, they will get stored in an array, and once you hit the Temporal Rift will detonate and deal damage to people around it. That's pretty self-explanatory because it actually explodes. But one of the things that's a little harder to ascertain is that if you pass through an enemy, once the Temporal Rifts detonate, any enemy that you have passed through will be slowed for, I think it's about 4 seconds. So everything that they do will be in slow motion for about 4 seconds, and then they'll resume normal time. And it can be really useful for boss fights if you're able to slow down their attack mid something that's really dangerous or does a lot of damage. Another added benefit of Temporal Rift is that when a rift drops, it stores your health and stamina at the moment you dropped it. So if you had full health and you dive in and take a bunch of damage, you can activate a Temporal Rift and go back to where you were, and it will restore your health to full health. The second enchantment we have is called Bloodlust. It's on the Knight Sword. I know all these icons are wonderful. As you can see, it's kind of like a red mist, and if you activate it, the blade will start to bleed. Basically, this is one of those augment your playstyle kind of enchantments. So, let me take some damage from this guy over here, and I can show you what I mean. So if you noticed up in the top left, when I take damage, there's a little yellow bar that comes behind the original damage, called the wound bar. if you manage to hit somebody while that wound bar is decreasing with Bloodlust at any time, it doesn't have to be active, you will restore as much of the wound as you dealt damage, or all the way up to the full amount of the wound. So it encourages a very aggressive playstyle, because even though you are taking damage, you have the opportunity to get that health back if you are fast enough and aggressive enough. In its active state, it basically acts as a lifesteal, so if you hit somebody, you will get the health right back, but it will cost mana per hit. And finally, the last weapon we have is the Rapier, which has a fully different moveset. And the enchantment on this weapon is called Razor's Edge. And what it does is, it's a very high risk, high reward enchantment. So every hit that you get a stack denoted by the very unceremonious number up in the top right there. That's just a large white number. That should look better eventually, but for the demo I wasn't too worried about the UI appeal. So every time you hit somebody, you get a stack, and when you activate the enchantment and hit somebody, the weapon's base damage will be multiplied by the number of stacks you have. The risk comes from, if you take a hit while you have stacks, you will lose 2/3 of your stacks. So it encourages you have to be very aggressive, but also very perfectionist in your execution of your execution of the flow of combat. You can't take very many hits, and the more stacks you have, the more risky it is to continue to not use the stacks.